So now we're playing against the 960. The heat is on. Knight f3. Will we get a Petrov? Or will we get knight c6? We get neither. We get c5. So let's just play our King's Indian attack, right? That's the great part of the King's Indian attack. We just ignore it all. d3. Maybe I should have played d3 earlier. But if they go d5 here, I'm going to go knight d2. And now we actually have a King's Indian attack where this is just a traditional King's Indian attack. Or King's Indian defense, but as white, so we're a tempo up. I'm extremely happy here. And I love my chances. So with the c5 move thrown in, I'm wondering if we can get d5, knight d2, and d4 played. If we do, I'm very happy. But if we don't, I'm very happy. I'm just a happy man. So I don't want to play knight e1 and f4 too soon because maybe they do something weird. I want to maintain some flexibility. So there's a lot of flexible moves here. The first one that I'm looking at is a4. Where is black better in this position? And that's why I came up with the idea of a4. a4 is, I've been playing this a little bit. This is because generally in the King's Indian defense, you play a5. And the reason why is because we're trying to prevent black from getting more space with something like b5 and b4. So a4, now it's a little bit harder, at least. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit harder to play a6 and b5 because we can capture it and there's a pin on the a file here. And a5 isn't as conducive to black's plans. Hopefully I use that word right. I'm just trying to sound smart for you guys. But now I want to go knight d2 and just continue my development where generally if you see your opponent in the King's Indian defense play this a4 and c4, it's not really the right plan. And I think we should be happy here. So just normal development. And now that they played castles, I'm starting to want to play a move like f4. I might even want to delay it for a move or two with a move like knight c4. Knight c4 looks extremely natural. d5 we're not worried about. I might even just go back to see if they take on e4 or not. And just give up a move. Because if they take on e4, I'm happy. We can play c3, and I think that position offers us an advantage. And if they push as well, I think that offers us an advantage too. Just because they've played this a5 move, and this doesn't really help them in this type of position. So I'm really wanting to kick this bishop around. I want to see if they go back or take on f3. What will they do? If they take... Okay, they go here instead. I'm looking at g4 now. You're never really scared of these knight takes g4s. They don't really pan out. So, well, we're going to have to prove it, aren't we? Knight e3. And we're just going to bring as many pieces as we can to our king side. Keep the king safe, right? Nothing special. Keep the king safe. They might want to try to capitalize on the pin on this diagonal with knight d4. Knight e3 was a little too aggressive for them, I guess. They should have maintained the pin and then tried for knight d4. Here, the biggest problem for them is going to show up very quickly. The problem is that, well, first off, f5 doesn't really work. We can take it. But even so, they're getting rid of a lot of pieces. And that's just not going to end well when they're trying to attack my king. And, most importantly, they sacrifice the piece. If you are down material, you have to maintain as much material on the board as you can to keep things complicated. If you don't do that, problems can happen. I want to play c3. I could take b7. I don't care about b7. I care about king safety. King safety is very important. If they take on e3, I think I'll take with the f pawn. And the idea here is if they take on f5, I can go e4. Do I throw in any bishop d5 check or queen g4s? Queen g4 doesn't look silly. Let's go queen g4. Just attacking the knight, asking where it wants to go. It's just setting up a little tricky. If queen d7, then we can play e4 and take advantage of the pin on the queen on d7. I don't imagine they'll play that, but it's good to set those types of moves up as a tricky. I don't know how many pieces I want to trade off because they do have 2 pawns for the piece. But maybe that's okay. This is with check. Our queen is hanging for the move, but because they're in check, that's much more important. I think I'm going to want to trade off at least one more pair of pieces, which is the queens here. This attacks b7, makes it a little bit annoying to defend it. I'm threatening queen takes b7 right now. If they trade queens, I'm happy. If I can win this pawn, things become a little bit better. We're up 1 point of material right now. Just 1. So there's still a little bit of work to do. They do have 2 pawns in an ending. And the reason why we want to still be careful is because, well, they have 2 pawns that, well, if too many pieces come off, maybe those pawns start rolling and they're hard to stop, right? So being mindful of that is very important. But luckily, that move lets us trade by force. Queen takes b7, and now they can't avoid me either taking their queen or their rook, or just taking the pawn at the very least. They could try to play something like queen d8, but I take on a8. Yeah, so again, not really a good way to avoid the trades here. So we're extremely happy with this position now. Yes, I think we are extremely happy, right? Yes. If I can just get this pawn off the board, if I could trade this pawn for any one of my other pawns, except for my A pawn, I would be extremely happy. Because then the pawn just runs. So a goal of mine is just to play something like c4, bishop d2, and take the pawn. Even if they go rook b8 and take b2. I'm assuming there'll be a trade, that's why. But I would willingly go into that, because if I get this pawn captured, I'm also covering a8 with this bishop. Feels like the trades are just going to come. So c4. I could have gone e4 to try to capture on h6 there. It felt unlikely. Now I'll go e4. Doesn't hurt at this point. Now I can go knight g4. Or bishop h3, my apologies. And this feels good. This exchange we're very happy about. If we exchange too much, that's good. That's actually very good, because these pawns aren't really going anywhere yet. They're way too slow. Yeah, we can take that. Just go king f2, and I'll go bishop d2 next move. And the second we take this pawn off the board, this a5 pawn, game's over. Let's go king g3. Or should I go king g2? Oh, they just end up resigning. I was thinking maybe bishop d2, but the problem is rook h2 check, king e3, rook h3 check, king e2, rook h1 check, king d1. Or sorry, no, rook h2 check, king d1, and then rook h1 check. I just go bishop e1. Which would have been fine, because then I can go king c2, and if they ever give a check, I go back to d2. And I eventually solve my problems. So that's good. Let's check out the analysis, though. See how we could have improved on our play. I think in the opening, again, maybe I should have played some sort of d3. Oh, there's a hanging pawn. And this pawn is hanging, I believe. If queen e7, there's d4. Okay. I played a lot of games today. I'm just going to pretend like that didn't happen. Guys, remember, sometimes you just like, you autopilot, right? You autopilot in the opening. That's what I was doing. Be careful of that. I was too focused on getting my plans in, and that punished me a little bit. But we got our normal King's Indian setup, d6. Generally, I'm more wanting to see d5. And I would have been super happy here. Actually, maybe knight c3 is better. Is knight c3 better? And just as a forewarning, it's going to say that we are slightly worse because this is a King's Indian defense and the computer hates these setups, but you got to understand that the setups are totally fine. We have our normal ideas of playing either knight h4 or knight e1 and some sort of f4, for example. And in this position, normally you get this as black, but white in this position would be able to play something like b5 or knight e8 already. So we're actually just a tempo ahead, which is really nice.